Hello and welcome to the Tartan Touchline, the podcast where we talk all things football with a West of Scotland twist. From the top tier to the grassroots, we cover the game like no one else. Fetch a scarf, grab a cuppa or a tinny, and join us for our weekly football chat. My name is Aidan Gilbride, and joining me is my co-host, Lauren McCulloch. So, Lauren, our first ever episode. Let's just get into it then. So, I guess just introduce ourselves a wee bit, maybe. So, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Lauren McCulloch, as Aidan already mentioned. I play football myself. I play for Stenhousemuir. I've played kind of within the top three tiers, mainly of Scottish women's football, bar the top. But yeah, no, I really enjoy my football. I'm a St Mirren fan, have been since I was 4 years old when I first got taken to Love Street. So I've been hooked ever since, for my sins probably. But yeah, no, love football, love all kind of levels of football. So yeah, this was a perfect show for me.
Yeah, and my name's Aidan Gilbride, like I said in the intro, but I am from East Gilbride. I grew up watching football, just being surrounded by people that liked football and were talking about football. It was very hard to avoid, especially, I feel especially in the west of Scotland, it feels that way. But yeah, no, I was a runner for about, it's part of almost 2 decades, to be honest with you. But football was always my love. Running was my passion, but football was what I loved to watch. So yeah, like for me, I went over to America for university on a track and field scholarship, but I kept up to date with the Scottish League while I was over there because that's what I grew up watching. So yeah, I'm just super excited that I get to sit with a like-minded person and talk about what's going on in the Scottish League, because I think it's an interesting league, or it's an interesting kind of landscape to talk about. So I'm very excited to get into it.
Yeah, it's never boring, is it?
No, never boring at all. There's always something to talk about. So how was your weekend first, Lauren? How was that?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I went to the St Mirren St Johnstone game. It probably would have got football stopped, I'm not going to lie. But that seems to be the case being a St Mirren fan. It's never easy. I had my own game on Sunday. It was just a friendly, drew to each. So yeah, not a bad weekend, but could have been better.
Yeah, for myself, I wasn't able to go to any games. I had work on the Sunday. I actually had work on the Saturday too. I was working an athletics event at the Emirates Arena, but I also at 3 a.m. had to drive. Oh, had to. I offered to. I probably should preface that.
Yeah, you should probably keep that in there.
Yeah. But I offered to drive my girlfriend and our pals who were going to Budapest for a wee city break to Edinburgh Airport. Now, I live in East Kilbride, so we left, which it's not far away, but their flight was at like 7 a.m. And so I had to leave. I had to leave my house just after 3 o'clock. I think it was like 3 a.m. And so, like, the drive itself was fine. There was no problems. The roads were empty. But see, when I got to Edinburgh Airport, you're tired, and any little tiny thing just gets to you. And I dropped them off. I'm literally in there for no more than 2 minutes. If anything, I think I'm being generous by saying 2 minutes. I was probably in there for about a minute. Pulled up to the little thing to pay, and it was £6 just to drive in there for 2 minutes. It was just, I was getting frustrated. The Apple Pay wasn't working on my phone. I'm getting people beating their horns behind me, and I'm trying to put my card in, put my PIN in. Oh, it was just
all
a bit
of
of a
this
nightmare.
at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it was
What
just
a
not.
scam.
It wasn't the right. I don't think there is a right time for that, but like it just was not ideal. I just wanted to get home and get back to my bed, really.
No, fair enough. That's
Okay,
an
then.
absolute nightmare.
Will we just get into, I guess, Scottish football then? Let's start. I'll let you take it away, Lauren. And
yeah,
what's
why
going on?
not? So, yeah, I mean, there was a mixed bag of results this weekend, I think. Obviously, the standout, I think, being Hearts' 6-0 demolition of Dundee. Now, that was really unexpected for me, I think, just with the run that Hearts have been on. They've been really inconsistent this season. Dundee, Tony Docherty's got them kind of flying, but yeah, I don't know what happened there, but Shanklin got one. Spittle scored an absolute screamer, which we'll obviously touch upon later. New signing Cabangu got 2. Again, fantastic. Drama got the 5th, and then Vargas got 1 in the 92nd minute. So I don't even know what else you can say about that. It's just a demolition job.
I think that Tony Docherty, listen, I'm a big fan of Tony Docherty. I think he's done a great job at Dundee. I think, considering the injuries they've had recently, some of the results, I mean, to get back-to-back results against the Old Firm is very, very impressive. Especially, I was up at the Dundee Celtic game, and it was, you know, I think before that game, in their 5 encounters leading up to that with Celtic, they'd conceded 17 goals and scored only 2. And then they scored 3 in 90 minutes against a strong Celtic side, by the way. Yeah, maybe a Celtic side that was had been a bit flat as of recent, but take nothing away from it. It was a fantastic performance, and it was also for a neutral point of view, it was a great game to watch. But I think Tony Docherty came out after the game and just said it's just one of those games. They happen. But all credit to Hearts. They really, I think they proved a lot of people wrong. Because, like you said, it's been quite an inconsistent season, or probably quite a poor start to the season for Hearts. But absolutely excellent, and it does look like Cabangu is going to be a really good signing for them.
Yeah, he does. He just looks so composed in the middle of the pitch. He just kind of goes by people effortlessly, and the run he made for his first was exceptional, and the pass from Shankland was Shankland back to his best, which I think he'll be happy with. He's had a lot of critics this season, just obviously not living up to the heights. But yeah, he looked back to his best. Hearts looked back to their best, and I think Dundee will be looking at it, and I think the goalkeeping department there has been really shaky. I think as much as Docherty's built a really strong squad, I think, McCracken, first half of the season, he had a few howlers, don't get me wrong. How he got in the Scotland squad, I've got no idea. But fair play to him. Carson, I think he did keep the score down, which is mad considering he still conceded 6, but the goal, Drama's goal, the fumble, it was a poor watch.
It must be from a goalkeeping point of view. I can't comment on it. I've never been a goalkeeper, but it must be one of the worst feelings in the world. You must feel like everything is like to have the ball in your hands and drop it right at the feet of the opposition player. It's a hard one to take. I think Carson's a good keeper, and I think he's been pretty solid for Dundee. But I think it's a performance he'll want to forget about. To be honest with you,
100%. I think Carson. I mean, he's proved over the years he is a great goalkeeper, but I think the amount of time that ball was in the air to then fumble it to the point where there was three of his defenders round him as well. So it was just a poor showing all round for that goal. But yeah, I mean, I think we've spoken enough about that game, so we'll move on. Hibs 2, Aberdeen 0. Again, 2 teams contrasting run of form. That is now 10 unbeaten for David Gray's Hibs and 14 winless league run for Aberdeen, who started absolutely flying, have just completely fell away.
It's one of, and I really don't mean to be too critical, but it's got to be one of the biggest falls I've seen from a team in quite some time. At the start of the season, there was a kind of fight and desire in that Aberdeen squad that I had not seen from another team out with Celtic and Rangers for a very long time in this league. And I remember going into that Celtic and Aberdeen clash at Parkhead. I think a lot of Celtic fans didn't really believe the hype until they played them. I mean, the arrogance of the man, and I say arrogance in a good way, by the way, to be 2-0 down at Parkhead and bring on 2 strikers and just say, listen, whatever happens, let's just go for it. And they were fantastic in that second half. But I think we've spoke about it, off air. The result against, I think, Celtic in that semi-final, I think that was Celtic trying to prove a point, but I think it's really damaged the kind of psyches and the kind of the mindset of those Aberdeen players, because they just haven't ever really been the same afterwards, have they, Lauren?
Yeah, I don't know. I think everyone kind of expected them to fall at some point. Like there's no other team in the league out with Celtic that can really sustain that level of performance for that length of time. And I think looking at Aberdeen, Jimmy Tilleen came in. Obviously, you've got that cliche new manager bounce, and he got that in abundance. But I think you can start to see the cracks showing. I think a few teams have cracked it. If I just looked to the First league game they lost was at St Mirren Park when we won 2-1. And you could just see there was a little bit of hope given to St Mirren because the centre-backs were very shaky. And if you've got a quick striker, i.e. Toyosi Olasanya, who will run all day for you, you hit a ball right in between those two centre-backs and they don't know what to do. And that was heightened at Pittodrie last week, where Ribizic actually turned to Talene and said, I'm coming off after half an hour after being run ragged by Olasanya. So I think there's now little holes starting to show in that Aberdeen team. They will need to strengthen. And I think the fans are calling them to strengthen because they don't want to see the back of Talene after that wonderful 12-game run, whatever it was. They won't want to get rid of him, but they will want to see improvements quick because they are falling.
I've been quite a big fan of him. I like the way that he comes across. I like that kind of stoic way he is on the sideline. But I'm now starting to wonder if what is going on. And for me, I don't want to be too critical of the players on the part, but I don't really think this is a Jimmy Thelene problem. I think this is a problem that the game that I go back to isn't really even necessarily the Celtic game at Parkhead. It was the clash with Rangers. Granted, our struggling Rangers side, but the mentality of the Aberdeen players on that night, they ground out a result that they wouldn't have normally been able to do in years gone past. So I think, I think there is just almost unfortunately a culture of losing that's built up, and they just can't seem to get out of this rut that they're in. I think all they need one good result. They need one like solid performance and good result, and I still believe that they'll, be able to pick it up. But every time I think, surely this will be the game, it doesn't seem to happen. So yeah, no, it's not looking good for Aberdeen right now. I mean, I think it shows how fickle football fans can be. I mean, after the game, you saw clips of the fans gesturing towards the players and even the manager, which is pretty fickle considering. Look at the start they had. So yeah, will we move on to Hibs now? So thoughts on Hibs?
Yeah, so one team in free fall, there's another team on the rise, and David Gray, I don't even know what to say, to be honest. He was gone. He was a man that was living
He was a dead man
on the
walking.
edge. Yeah, he was living on the edge. I think one more defeat would have done it, but he managed to turn it around, and now they are 10 unbeaten. 10 unbeaten, and that is just ridiculous considering the start of the season they had.
Yeah, we know a couple of Hibs fans, and it's quite sad that the kind of mentality they have right now is, oh, it's all going good now, but for some reason they're waiting for this bubble to burst. And maybe that is just years gone past disappointment. But I was at the Aberdeen Hibs game that took place. I think it was after the St Mirren game, Lauren.
Yeah, it would have
Yeah,
been. Yeah.
and it was, by the way, again, one of those games that is fantastic for a neutral. I mean, what an end to the game. There was like 3 goals in I think like 5 or 6 minutes or something like that. It was a fantastic game, but I think this game had opposite effects on each team. Credit to the Hibs board for going against the kind of normal ways of doing things in football now, which is just to sack the manager. They looked at this culture that had built up at Hibs where they just were losing, constantly sacking managers, and they went, listen, let's stick with him, see what he can do. Because you did get the sense that you were watching a Hibs team that did have good players. They just weren't putting in the performances to get over the line. That performance seemed to really turn things around for him and the squad and the club. And yeah, they're flying high right now, and now we find ourselves in a situation where when I went to that game, Hibs and Aberdeen, it was way back it was a long time ago now, but Hibs were 12th in the league and Aberdeen were second in the league, and now Hibs are 2 points behind Aberdeen. So it's been quite a turn of events.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about, and I'm just looking at the league table just now and just how tight it is. Like, I'm looking at Ross County in 11th on 26 points. Hibs, in fact, we'll go even one further. We'll go Aberdeen, 35 points. That's a 9-point gap between 4th and 11th, which is ridiculous. And a run of form can turn that round in an instant. But yeah, I think
it's getting very crowded in there. And, a lot of people, like, again, I was singing their praises a couple of moments ago. Dundee, have taken points off the Old Firm in back-to-back games, and they find themselves in 10th place right now. That just tells you how crowded it is right now, and that kind of after really the top 2.
Yeah. And I think if we look onto the next result, St Mirren 0, St Johnstone 1, Bozo Mikulic with a goal. Shall we say it was definitely something. It kind of trickled into the back of the net. It was slow motion. I just don't know.
Can I ask Lauren from a St Mirren point of view, because I think it was a game, and you'll go on to discuss it. There was a couple of decisions you weren't particularly happy with or agreed with, but I had a look at the table. Um, would you say the story of St Mirren's season has been inconsistency? Because you're looking at a team that they tend to give problems to the Celtics, the Rangers, and stuff like that. It's a team that I don't think they like to play, but they've also lost the second most amount of games in the league, but drawn the second least. So it's one of those situations. Is it games that not necessarily you should have won, but games that you would hope to pick up points that you're not.
Yeah, so I think the way it's always been under Stephen Robinson is we don't like to have the ball. We are a team that are really good on the counter. We like to soak up pressure to then hit teams. We've done it over and over again. I think that's why playing your Celtics, your Rangers, your Aberdeens, that suits us, because have the ball. Have the ball, do what you want with it. But we'll come and hurt you. But yeah, it's definitely been inconsistent. I think obviously at the start of the season we had Europe. That was obviously then Thursday, Sunday. That for a team that hadn't played in Europe in my lifetime, that can take its toll. That can take its toll, and obviously when we got knocked out, that kind of knocked us for six a little bit. We had injuries picking up, and obviously injuries aren't an excuse. Like I look at other teams in the league, they've had injuries as well, but when you look at your centre backs were obliterated at one point. We had to re-sign Charles Dunn for the third time, who's now at Coleraine, so fair enough. But yeah, it was just, I think Saturday summed us up, to be honest. There was a big story last night. The St Mirren hierarchy had released a statement talking about VAR. They want the SFA removed from managing VAR because they feel like it's now starting to really cost us. There was a table published at the end of last season, and we had the most amount of decisions that went against us. Kilmarnock, who finished one place above us, had the most decisions go for them. If that balances out, we finish above Kilmarnock, more money, etc. Right now, we're still sitting top of that table. If the penalty claim that we had, personally, I think it was a penalty, but Elvis Bomono gets bundled over in the box. You can see the leg gets swiped in, but Dan McFarlane doesn't even get called to the monitor. It just gets cleared, and
Yeah, I think it's cannot be said enough. It seems to be the dominating thing is that it's the inconsistency of VAR, and that's what I think is frustrating most teams. And obviously, personally, yourself as a St Mirren fan, you've said the amount of decisions that have went against you. But I think it's probably the feeling of most teams in the league. I think it could be the only thing that everyone in the league is unilaterally agreed on.
100%. 100%. I think it is far too inconsistent, and I think it's more so without VR, you can forgive human error. You can forgive human error, but it's the fact that they can go and watch it again and still get it wrong, and you're like, are you being for real? Really? But yeah, I think if obviously Willie Collum's VR review comes out, if there is a turn where they say that should have been a penalty, that is the sixth decision that has went against St Mirren this season, which again puts them at the top of that table. But I could speak about that all day, and I don't really want to because we don't have the time.
I would like to say credit to St Johnstone. I think a lot of people, though, they might not have been a vintage performance against St Mirren, but that's 2 wins in the league and 3 wins on the bounce for a team that I think a couple of weeks ago people would have written them off and said they're going to go down. So it just shows, like we said, how strange the league is this year. But credit to St Johnstone, they seem to be turning out some performances recently.
Definitely, and I think you've seen the jubilation of their fans. I think they're really starting to believe that they can turn it round under Simo Valakari, and watching the game, they played some really nice football. As much as the first half, they probably didn't do anything with it, but their patterns of play and their movement, and they seem to be getting there, which I think if they can beat the teams round about them, there is no reason why they can't pull themselves out of the hole. It's 5 points, and 5 points isn't a lot in football. But yeah, you know what? Sometimes you need a stroke of luck in football, and they got that at the weekend. And fair play to them, they were able to grind out the result, and that's what teams need to do in this league.
So the last game of Saturday was Kelly and Dundee United.
Yeah, Marley Watkins, 72nd minute winner. Bit of controversy around the goal. I think Jim Goodwin came out afterwards saying
What's your take on it first?
my take, I think keepers get too much protection, but I think that was a foul.
I think his arm went up intentionally to almost like disrupt him.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it should have been chopped off.
Yeah, I think it should have been chopped off. It is one of those ones. I think keepers are given too much protection. I think any kind of infringement of the goalkeeper, it's getting more so and more so. Keepers can just come down and, it's a foul because the keepers fell down. But they can come out with their whole body. They can use their arms. They are big presences for a reason. So I do see both ways, but this one in particular, I do think Dundee United were the victim of probably a wrong decision. But take nothing away from Kilmarnock, they had to win the game, and that's exactly what they did, and it pulled them out of that relegation playoff place because other results went for them at the weekend. And Dundee United, they're still sitting quite comfy there in third.
They are sitting comfortably in third, but I've watched Dundee United a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and they're not looking as clinical as they were. Sam Dalby still is having a great season, but you get the sense now of the last 5 results, they've lost 4. So you're in a situation, if you really want to try and nail on third, they need to start turning out some other performances. And listen, Jim Goodman's done a fantastic job at Dundee United. To come up and immediately be, in a European position is a fantastic thing for the club. And I think, I done a video a couple of weeks on it, for a period of time, and it still is. The top 4 is very 80s nostalgic for football fans. I mean, those 4 teams dominated the landscape in the 80s. So it's good to see, and hopefully they can continue, from a neutral point of view, that they can continue to be there. But yeah, let's will we move on to the Sunday clashes?
Yeah, so we have Celtic's 3-1 win at Fir Park. Only took them 49 seconds to take the lead through Maeda. Both sides had perfect starts for their new signings. Luke Armstrong for Motherwell obviously equalised. That was his first start since joining from Carlisle. He looks like a real handful, I think, for opposition defences, just his stature and his build, and he just looks like a really powerful player, which I think Motherwell were lacking. So I think he could be a little star for them. But then Celtic came out, equalised, took the lead again through Ida, and then, return of Jota, kind of fantastic start for him back in the green and white. Scores in the 94th minute, right in front of the Celtic fans. I don't think he could have asked for a better return.
No, he certainly couldn't have. He looked incredibly emotional afterwards, and I think the only thing to maybe touch on there is it gave me. I've been quite pessimistic and depressed about the state of football because sometimes I feel like loyalty doesn't exist anymore and it's all about money. When he left, it wasn't a feeling of disappointment. It was more, I wonder if he'll regret that. And I'm not saying he does regret it. I think it's a perfect case of the grass is not always greener on the other side. And I think he wanted to come back to a place that he feels he can call it home. But on the performance, I thought it's the best Celtic have looked in a number of weeks. They played well against Aston Villa, given some of the players they had out and some of the players that had departed. And I was surprised by that performance. But I have to say, they just looked a lot more kind of quick off the ball and with their pressing and stuff. They just looked a wee bit more themselves. And, Jota took the headlines with a 94th minute goal. He just came back to the club. But I have to say, Dyson Maeda, it was one of the best games he's played in a Celtic shirt. He was everywhere. He's just such a handful. His goal was that of a centre forward, leaning into the idea maybe he could play through the middle so that you could utilise Kuhn and Jota. And then both of his assists were, I mean, so the Jota one especially was so unselfish. He didn't have to make that pass, but he knew it was the smartest pass. And then his assist for Ida was just excellent. Uh, it's an interesting situation that Brendan Rodgers has, and I think he's got to test the waters on a few different, avenues and what he can do with that team, and how he put what front three he puts up, I guess. But yeah, Jota looked surprisingly fit. I thought he'd look pretty unfit, out of shape, but he looked pretty dangerous when he came on, albeit against a struggling Motherwell side now. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next next few weeks with that front three at Celtic.
Yeah, and I think moving on to the last game of the weekend, Rangers 4, Ross County 0. I think it was just a rampant Rangers performance by all accounts. There was news today that they have just signed Lyle Cameron from Dundee on a pre-contract. I don't know how I feel about that one. I think it's given me Connor Barron vibes, and I think Connor Barron started really well at Rangers. I think he has tailed off a little bit. Lyle Cameron, he is an exciting young prospect, don't get me wrong, but I just can't help to think that this might be a little bit of a big jump too soon.
Yeah, that exactly what I was going to say. It's the same way I feel about, and I'm not comparing to, because I think Lennon Miller at Motherwell is one of the brightest prospects in Scotland now. But there was rumours about Celtic being interested in him too soon. Develop as a player or go abroad. You know what I mean? But he won't start, and I don't know if Lyle Cameron will start for Rangers. It's one of those situations where I'm happy to be proven wrong, but it is an interesting one. I mean, good for him. He's got a big move to one of Glasgow's big two, and credit to him. He's put himself in that position to earn that move, but it is an interesting one. But going off the game, yeah, do you know what? Rangers really didn't have to come out of second gear after they went 3-0 up. I mean, the game was done at that point. Hadji, a good game. I think he's starting to find a little bit more form. Credit to him. Spent a large portion of time out that team and has kind of managed to get himself back into the starting lineup. I think him and Chefsky are starting to really connect well in a team that was largely criticised at the start of the season as being disjointed. They seem to be playing a bit better as a cohesive unit now, I would say. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. I think Hadji had a very, very long layoff, and he's had obviously setbacks in between, coming back, getting injured, coming back, getting injured. I think he is now, I think, as you said, starting to find his feet there. Kind of getting back to the player we all know that he can be, because there is no doubt the talent that he does possess. I think John Suter coming back to fitness for Rangers, I think, will only help them. Obviously, Robin Propper's kind of had a makeshift partner in there for a while now. But yeah, I think, if Rangers keep winning, it is a 10-point gap, but all they can do is finish as comfortable as they can in second place and build then on next season.
I think it's one of those scenarios that Rangers would have to, I think, hope for a total collapse at Celtic. Because even if Celtic were to lose a few games, they can afford to do that. Do you know what I mean? Because of the gap that they have built up. And of course, they play Dundee, as we are talking right now, tomorrow night. You would expect Celtic to win that game. But again, you would have expected Celtic to win that game when they went up to Dens Park a couple of weeks ago. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We're going to do a wee system where we actually talk about, so player of the weekend. We had a bit of a debate.
Yeah, we did
on that. So I think we're not going to say two, but we're going to give an honourable mention to someone. So
Yeah.
who's your player of the weekend, Lauren?
So my player of the weekend was Kabangu's Hearts' new signing. I think he just looks like a real bright spark. That I think that they have been missing. I think to obviously come into a new league, score 2 goals. I just think his overall play was just it just really seemed to spark life into Hearts. And I think obviously with the other players we'll probably mention that you're maybe expecting big performances from, I think this was a really unexpected one. But yeah, I'd give it to Cabango of Hearts.
I think the reason I'm in agreement with you, the reason we went that way was new player, new signing, new league to come in. His run for the first goal, he showed his power, his speed, took his goal really well. His second goal, he took really well on the half volley. And I think what's most important for Hearts fans is this might be the thing that Lauren Shanklin needs. He needs someone to be there to kind of push him on a little bit because he hasn't had a great season. He's had, frankly, a very, very, very poor season. So I think this could have a really positive impact on that Hearts team. And it was a fantastic performance from considering he's not played in the league before. Do want to give a shout out to Maida. Like I said, it was a fantastic performance from him, really. And Hadji had a good performance as well at Rangers, but I think we were quite set on Cabango. It was a fantastic performance from him. And then game of the weekend, I think, is quite an obvious one for us, Lauren.
Yeah, has to be the Dundee Hearts game. Yeah, I don't think you can look past that a 6-0, to be perfectly honest.
I think 1988 was the last time that they won by that many goals in the league.
Wow, okay, then that's definitely game of the weekend.
I think it was also just the unexpected nature of it. I think going into that game, I would have said Dundee were going to win that game.
Yeah, it came out of absolutely nowhere.
So a vintage performance from Neil Critchley's men, and maybe that will be another performance that will push. They're starting to make their way up the table a little bit. So yeah, goal of the weekend. There's a lot of well, not a lot of contenders, but I think of three of we had a couple. We discussed a couple, but there was three from that Hearts and Dundee game. But I think we settled on someone who, by the way, had a bit of a unknown good performance. I thought he was one of Hearts' brightest signings in the summer. Spittle
absolutely got outbidded by Hearts,
but he was excellent. Just some of his passes and some of his general movement and play was excellent. But the way that he took the second goal for Hearts was excellent.
Oh, it was incredible. I've always been a big fan of Blair Spittle. I think he's just a player that seems to have been about for years. You always hear about Blair Spittle. Yeah, I really like him as a player. I think he does fly under the radar, which I think he might thrive off of, because I think the pressure of being the kind of main man made him tail off a little bit at previous clubs, but because Hearts have kind of so many big characters, he can just go and play his own game, and he gets respect for that. And yeah, the way he took his goal, it was the touch and then the volley. It was just it was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there was other goals at Cabango's. Both of Cabango's goals were excellent, but I think we just thought the way that Spittle took it on the half volley was pretty excellent. Celtic's build-up goal for Maida was pretty good, but I think there was like a cross across to Ralston. It wasn't defended very well from Motherwell, and I think that took the shine off it just a little bit. So yeah, Blair Spittle gets our vote this week. Howler of the weekend, there wasn't that many. We've already spoke about it. Pretty poor goalkeeping error from Carson to drop the ball in front of the opposition player. It's not ideal. So sorry for that, Trevor, but we're going to give you the howler of the weekend. Okay, Lauren, do you want to move on to some European talk?
Yeah, why not?
European
Let's do it.
talk. We'll start with the Champions League, the fallout, I guess, of the first ever edition of the Champions League table. How did you, as a neutral, like the league table setup?
I think it's different. I don't know if I like it. I'm still kind of on the fence. To be honest, I think it was a way for the big governing bodies to get more matches in. I think the way the fixtures can work, some teams benefit more than others. Obviously, that happens in the group stage as well, but I think with the group stage, you have that chance home and away. You have that chance to go away from home, get a result, and then bring it back and try and maintain it. I think obviously playing just either home or away does take the shine off the Champions League a little bit. But I think we'll see how the knockouts and stuff go, and I just don't know. I'm definitely on the fence.
I leading into it was very much of the pessimistic nature that the Super League had been formed under our noses. However, I was actually pleasantly surprised by it. I do agree that it takes away the whole special nature of going away from home. Like Scottish teams like Celtic and Rangers being able to go away from home to a Bayern Munich which Celtic will be doing, but to be able to go away, some of the ties were at home. But I was pleasantly surprised by it. But I think what has to be made this season is Celtic and Rangers have to be given quite a lot of plaudits for how they've done in Europe. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about Scottish teams, maybe not necessarily Rangers, but Celtic, certainly Celtic, and not performing on the European stage. Um, not they weren't amazing. All of them were none of them. Sorry, not all of them were amazing performances from Celtic, but they've done enough to qualify, and they've earned the right to now go to Bayern Munich and play two legs against Bayern Munich. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of Celtic and Rangers. I have to give full credit to Rangers. When you saw that draw of the teams, you wouldn't have really given them a chance to qualify. I mean, there was a couple of winnable games in there, which they obviously did do. But to draw Tottenham and Manchester United, granted a fairly poor Manchester United and Tottenham team, but to finish in that top eight, and then you look at some of the teams that are below them, Ajax, the Turkish giants, Galatasaray, Fenerbahce, Roma, Porto, and Nice. I mean, teams that you would expect to beat Rangers. Obviously, they didn't play them, but to finish above them is excellent. And you look at the people that are in, or the teams that are in that top eight, and Rangers are probably the only one that you wouldn't have said could make the top eight. And so, full credit to Rangers and Philippe Clement. They've given themselves a real shot at a run in the Europa again.
Yeah, I think obviously if you look at the league for Rangers, I think a run in Europe, they needed it. I think they did need it to kind of lift their fans a little bit. Taking Tottenham to the wire, no matter how poor Tottenham are, to get a point there was a really, really good result for Rangers, and it did lift them. And then to go to Old Trafford, and for the best part of the game, they were the better side. And again, doesn't matter how poor Manchester United are, it's still Manchester United. Like, they were very unlucky there. And I think if you look at the team they put out as well, like by the end, I think they had, 4 18-year-olds on the park, or under 18-year-olds. So it's not like it was a full strength Rangers team either. But yeah, I think they more than deserve their place in the last eight, or not in the last eight, in the top eight of the table. But yeah, I think that they deserve all the credit.
Yeah, and they've kind of put themselves in a good position here, because what we now are kind of finding is that some of the draws that have actually happened for the playoff places, because Rangers are through, they're top eight, so they now just is a waiting game to see who's going to win in the playoffs. But you've got Roma have drew Porto, two teams that Rangers would probably want to avoid. Galatasaray and AZ, two teams that Rangers would want to avoid, and Fenerbahce and Anderlecht, probably two teams that Rangers would want to avoid. So, three of those teams are going to go out. So it's looking. Granted, the top eight was quite strong, but it's looking like a very positive thing for Rangers, that they might be able to have a bit of a run in Europa. For Celtic, though, I think it's a hard ask. They've done incredibly well to get there. I want to give a shout. The RB Leipzig performance from me was one of the best Celtic European performances in probably close to a decade, maybe even actually definitely more, probably 15 years or so. And they deserve to be in the position that they're in. Obviously, we'll touch a little bit later on that Bayern Munich tie, and the kind of unfortunate situation that's happened with the away fans. But yeah, no, credit to both Celtic and Rangers. And then obviously Hearts in the conference, very unlucky, one place away from qualifying. But that was Hearts when they were playing pretty poor at the start of the season. You just wonder how Hearts would maybe fare now if they were to go back and play the games now. But with regards to that Conference League, if you really look at it, if Chelsea don't win it, it's they've lost it rather than been beaten. But I kind of feel that Chelsea should win that. Obviously Fiorentina are in there; they're a strong side, but I can't really see a team that would beat Chelsea.
Yeah, no, I can't see it at all. I think if you look at the results already in the competition, they're just kind of brushing teams to the side. And, I think that's where maybe the league structure might not work in the Conference League. I think it's just there's too many, no offence, but below par teams to really compete. Obviously, that was down to Chelsea having a really poor season in the Premier League. Like, Chelsea would never be in the Conference League a few seasons ago. It was always, always, always Champions League, with obviously a couple of stints in the Europa League. But yeah, I don't know. I can't see anybody knocking that trophy from Chelsea. And again, I think it would be a case of they've lost it rather than anybody else winning it.
Yeah, I happen to agree. I'm just going to rhyme off a couple of surprises in that European campaign. So we've got Lille coming top 8. I think that's fantastic from them. Madrid and Bayern, 11th and 12th. You would never have said that. Albeit, I still have Madrid to win the tournament. I still think they'll win the Champions League. I just think they know how to win it.
They always start poorly
Yeah.
and then just pick up as the competition
Yeah.
goes on. They always just find a way to get there.
Milan coming 13th, despite having an absolute, frankly, horrendous campaign in the Serie A. PSG 15th, City 22nd. I mean,
Wild.
luck going their way towards the end to get through. There is something obviously weird going on at City now. And then you've got teams like Brest and then my last one is Sporting, but it's for the reason that a couple of weeks ago they were in second place in that league table. They lose Amarin, he goes to United, and they've just completely fallen off a cliff. And it's quite sad to see. I loved seeing Sporting up there. It was different, it was interesting, and so it's quite sad what's happened. And it, there's a part of me that's like, I wish he'd have stayed, rather than go to. But I guess when a team like Man United come calling, it must be very hard. Just with the name, really. I know things haven't been great for United in recent years, but I think it's just the name.
I think if you look at the way that Amarim's been talking, though, he is given very, I don't want to say Fergie vibes, but he's very stone cold and he knows that it's not good enough. And I think he backs himself to actually pull Man United out of the hole, but he needs to get rid of the deadwood first before he can do that. But that's why I think he took it, because he believes in his own ability as a manager to do that.
Yeah, I think not that there hasn't been strong characters that have been managers since Ferguson, because you've had Mourinho, Van Gaal, and then even to a degree, I think Ten Hag, but certainly Mourinho and Van Gaal. I believe that since Fergie, there's been a hint of the decisions that were being made weren't being made by them, and it was being made by people above them. And I think what Manchester United really need to get back to is their roots of the manager is the one in control, the one that makes the calls, the one that everything falls on him. And I do think he has a bit of something about him. I just wonder if my worry is with the way that things have been, will he be given the time to do this? Because he's came out and said it's the worst Manchester United team ever, which it's quite hard to disagree with it. And yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in, well, I guess the playoffs. We'll touch quickly, I guess, on what's going on down south in the English Premier League. Well, I think it's there's a couple of games to point out. Will we talk first? Let's talk first about the three teams that I'm just loving that are doing well. Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, and Newcastle. Yes, Newcastle lost the other day, but these are teams that years ago you never would have said would be competing for Europe, and it's especially I feel especially strongly about Forest and Bournemouth. Two teams that you would have just written off at the start of the season.
Oh, 100%. I think, especially with the season Forest kind of had last year, they probably would have been tipped to go down this season. But Nuno Espirito Santo, I mean, what a job he's done. What a job he's done. He's just, I don't know what it is. He seems to have really bought into the Forest culture, and the fans love him, and the players. I mean, I was watching an interview from Morgan Gibbs White the other day, and he was just saying, he's like, I absolutely love it here. I don't want to be anywhere else. I get to play with freedom. The manager really rates me. He backs me. He trusts me. Just everything he was saying, I was just like, he's got them. Like he's got that changing room, and on their day they can beat anyone, and they have proven that, and they've been outstanding.
Yeah, no, I have to say Chris Wood is just getting all the service that he needs, and he's just putting them in the back of the net all the time. I think it's an interesting one because there is like that part of me that's also like, well, and I use this word very loosely, but they they sacrificed they last season they decided we're going to take the risk of getting a points deduction. They managed to survive, and it's paying off now. And my worry is that going to encourage other clubs to do that? Because it's not going to work for everyone. It's worked for Forest, and that's great. But for the first time in the time that they've been in that top four, I honestly believe they're going to finish in the top four. I think they're good enough to finish in the top four. It'll be just interesting to see other teams and if they pick things up a little bit, because there will be some of the bigger teams. Well, towards the end of the season, I do feel will go on a bit of a run.
Who thought Chris would
I know,
be?
absolutely. It's
Wow.
great. It is great to see. Bournemouth, I think, equally as surprising.
I think even more so. I think if you look at the amount of money Forest have spent
Mhm.
compared to Bournemouth, I think it's just incredible. Some of the results that they've been pulling out the bag, they just seem to know how to win and win against the big teams. And I don't even know, because I think you don't even expect it. They've got Ryan Christie playing in a number 6, which you never thought you would see.
I was talking to my dad the other night, and I said, "Did you know they're playing Christie in a CDM position?" And he was like, "What? He's never played that. It's crazy." But he's got the best. It's a bit like the Forest situation. He's getting the best out of the players that he has,
Yep.
and that's always really good to see. And there is a part of me as a neutral that was like, I'd love to see Forest and Bournemouth in Europe. I think it would be fantastic for the English Football League. But especially for, I mean, 7-0 against, by the way, a good Brighton side. Yeah, maybe a bit inconsistent at times, but a good and solid Brighton side, which is great to see. Obviously, Newcastle are up there still as well. So it's all really to play for at the top of that league. They're now, well, at least not the top of the league, from third down. Well, yeah, I would say it's very competitive. I just want to touch quickly on Villa. For me, Villa are of the same caliber of those teams, and granted they're only just behind them, but I do think that Villa are suffering from the European hangover. Amazing what they've done in Europe to get in that top 8. That's fantastic, but you do see this with teams. You do see teams that make it into Europe for the first time, and they're just not able to perform at all levels, and they end up having to put their eggs into one basket. Granted, they're still within reach of that top 4 again, um, but it'll be interesting to see how it continues to affect them now that they've in the top 8, so they're going to have a longer run in Europe. Do you want to talk a little bit about Tottenham? Maybe just
Not really. No,
not
I'm
really. Let's
joking.
not talk about Tottenham.
Yeah, no, I think Tottenham are Tottenham. They just can't seem to strike any sort of consistency. And I think, yes, again, injuries have played their part. They've got Archie Gray, 18 years old, playing at centre back, where he's never really played before. And fair play to him, he's been outstanding. But for the last however many weeks, they've had 3 fullbacks and a centre mid in the back four. And their goalkeeper out injured. They had Fraser Forster in goals for a little bit. They've now brought Anthony Kingsley, I think that's how you pronounce it. Who he looks solid enough, but he's a young keeper, and he'll take a bit of time to bed in. But they do need to invest in January if they want to get anything out of this season. Semi-final against Liverpool coming up, the second leg. They have a 1-0 win to take to Anfield. Can they keep that with that team? I don't know.
I think the sad thing for me is, why, as a football fan, and it's not me wanting United to do bad, but why, as a football fan, do I feel more sorry for what's going on at Spurs than I do at United? And I think it's because I think United, what's going on at United has been the fault of years and years and years of very poor business. Whereas I feel Spurs is maybe similar, maybe poor business, but I can't help but feel sorry for them because it just doesn't feel like the manager's been backed. And especially when they're going through the injury crisis that they're going through. Um, and he really needs to start picking up wins. And I do get this horrible feeling that if they go out to Liverpool to take only, I mean, to take a lead to Anfield is obviously good, but it will be a very tough task in my opinion, for them to still go through because Liverpool are so strong, especially at home. I I I get the feeling that if that doesn't go the way of Tottenham, I kind of feel like Ange might get sacked.
I think it's finally got to the point where Postecoglou is now, he's biting his tongue to spite his cheek a little bit now. He's changing the way he's playing because he knows he can't get away with it anymore. And he was so stubborn up until a certain point, and now he's went, you know what, we are in trouble here, so I need to change something. Fair play to him. Beat Brentford obviously at the weekend there. I think the Tottenham admin on TikTok was having a bit of a laugh with Jamie Carragher, saying that we would concede more than we would score. We won 2-0 up the road. Sorry, Jamie.
I think just lastly on Tottenham, some people fall differently on the Ange debate. Is he a good manager? Is he not a good manager? And I think he's a good manager. I love his style of play. The only thing that a lot of what was going on at Tottenham recently this season, for me, a lot of it is to do with not being backed and, you know, uh, poor transfers and stuff like that. But I think the only thing that I could put to him is you're right, he was so stubborn, he did not want to change. And the reality is, if you want to get results when you've got all these injuries out, you do need to kind of adapt a little bit. And if he continues to do that, then that's great. But I just get the sense of the stubbornness of him might be his own downfall, unfortunately. We'll quickly just touch on actually the semi-final predictions. Who do you think will go through? So you've got Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Tottenham.
I think it'll be a Newcastle-Liverpool final.
I think it'll be an Arsenal-Liverpool final. Because a couple of weeks ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said Newcastle-Liverpool. But that performance against City, I feel I've been quite critical of Arsenal, and I don't really buy into the hype. That was a changing of the tide. That was a changing of the guard.
Trent Callan's still asking them to stay humble.
He kind of, I feel, do you know what? I feel like he kind of got what was coming to him. I mean, that was always going to, I think it is just a bit of banter. I don't think people were talking on TalkSport this morning about, was it harsh?
I think you could tell by his expression he was just having a bit of a laugh and a joke, couldn't you?
But yeah, no, absolutely romped City. I mean, I don't think we've seen someone do that to City in the league, at least, for a very long time. Even Liverpool, when they were at their best, never really battered. I would say the season Liverpool got to Champions League final against Real Madrid the first time, I think it was, but was that back in 2016, 17 season?
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
That season they battered City, and it was unexpected. But that was the first time, because following that, City just never really get battered. And yeah, okay, this season's been a bit of an odd season for City, but I really do think that was a changing of the guard a little bit. And I think that performance for Arsenal, I think will be really good in this, because I genuinely still don't think this is over. There are genuine games where Liverpool could still drop points. One is coming up. Liverpool could easily drop points against Everton, because lastly we'll touch on Everton have brought David Moyes back in. They've scored 8 goals in 3 games. Before that, they hadn't scored 8 goals in a dozen games.
Yeah, and I think Moyes is that 3 wins in his last 4, and I think Dyche had 3 wins in his last 19. So
yeah,
you can definitely see that he's getting more out of the players, and they've really bought into him as a manager. But I think when you think of Everton, you think of David Moyes, just with what he did the first time round, and there's no doubt he's a good manager. And I think he was, I mean, I might eat my words in a few weeks when it maybe wears off, but I think it was the only right option for them. And I'm not normally a fan of teams going back the way, but I think in the state that Everton were in, I think they just needed to get back to basics, back to what they know, and that's David Moyes.
And the reason I say that Liverpool could drop points, listen, Liverpool have been excellent this season. I think Arne Slot is. I think what he's done is he's taken what was the kind of the chaos of Liverpool's attack, and he's almost made it controlled chaos. If that sounds correct, the defense is far better, and I think overall they might not be quite as exciting to watch, but they certainly are getting the results they need. And maybe the gap is still too big, but I just think that there's still more to happen in this league, and there's still games to be played. Um, I will say that the reason that I think Liverpool might struggle at the Everton game, there's a lot of stuff happening in that game. It's the final game ever in the Merseyside derby of Liverpool and Everton at Goodison Park, and it's under the lights. They're in good form. I think it will be a really good game. And I do feel though, if Liverpool turn up and in all departments and can ignore all the kind of all that going on, I think they'll get the job done. But I think that would be a really interesting game. And if you've been to Liverpool, when you're standing in Stanley Park, the fact you can see both the stadiums, it would be quite sad to see them move. Great new stadium, it looks fantastic, but it is really it's the last time where the club, Moyes, the players can give the fans something to cheer about against Liverpool at Goodison. So yeah, that's everyone going on down south. I mean, do we have time to touch on Rashford, or we leave that?
I think we wait and see how he actually gets on.
I agree, because personally, I have some opinions on it, but I don't want to eat my words just in case. So let's just move on to the big debate, Lauren. The big debate. Celtic's ban in Europe for the pyrotechnics. Yeah, Celtic are the front of this story because it's them that have been banned. But I feel this is a culture that has built up this so-called ultra culture across all teams. Or originating a way back in the day in Italy, it just kind of it seeped its way into every football club. It seems to be. What's your take on the situation? Obviously, Celtic have previously been fined 20,000. I think was it 20,000 euros for when they done it in Dortmund, and they've subsequently from that Aston Villa game, they've now been told that for one away match in Europe, they can't bring supporters. And I don't think Celtic will feel as a team, to go to a team like Bayern Munich without any fans. It's not a great situation.
I think for the team, it's a losing battle then. Bayern are a massive club. The German fans, I was over there for the Euros. They are exceptional.
It's fantastic.
It's a fantastic place, but I think if you're an away fan, an away team, you need as much backing as you can get. And I think for me, and I know I know that there will be a lot of people that disagree, but it's the minority ruining it for the majority. And as much as yes, there's ultras culture and things like that, I think there's a place, but all of the added stuff that just seems to have creeped in, the fights, the pyro, the offensive banners, like there's no need for it. Like you go into a stadium, you chant for your team, you have a little bit of banter with the away, with the opposition fans, but it stays in the ground. It stays in the ground and it builds an atmosphere. And see, once the game's done, once that whistle's blown, everyone exits and the game's done. But I think there's more and more trouble after games that I don't like seeing. I think every week there's a different story of someone being hit by something, or someone being robbed, someone being beat up, and it's just, or like buses being targeted, for example, as well. Like, it is tricky, but I think going back to Celtic and Bayern, Celtic going to the Alliance Arena with no fans, that'll take its toll on the players.
I think two things. So absolutely, Celtic Celtic are a team that notoriously, I think they feed off of fans' energy. They seem to play better when the fans are louder and they're singing songs and they back the team. And we saw that in the COVID season. Celtic really struggled without fans in the stadium. But I have to say, I think the thing that's saddest about this story is football is nothing without fans. And the Allianz Arena is one of, if not one of the best stadiums in the world. And I think it's quite sad that there will be no Celtic fans there to go and support their team. And like you said, it's a minority that's ruining it for the majority. I believe there is a place for passionate fan groups. I'll say that. I don't like using the word ultras. I think it's pretty daft, to be honest with you. My biggest issue is, a couple of years ago, Celtic won UEFA's award for the best fans, and now they're getting fined constantly by UEFA. And it is this use of pyrotechnics, in my opinion. Yeah, banners can be offensive, and I get that, but banners aren't going to physically hurt somebody. These pyrotechnics are going to someone's eventually going to get very seriously hurt by them. And I don't understand why they've built up in the way they have, especially in Scotland this year. It seems like, in this season, it seems like it's just taken on a whole new form.
Well, you look at Aberdeen, they've got an accepted pyrotechnics display for a few games this season where the board and the club have agreed this is where the pyros can be used in a safe space. Which, I mean, if the clubs are doing everything safely and they've done all the checks and stuff, then 100% be my guess. But I do think you're right. I think there comes a point where it just takes one person to misuse it and it could cause some serious harm.
Fans create atmosphere, singing, and fans singing and up on their feet and cheering for a team. That's what creates atmosphere. And banners add to that. Displays, tifos, they add to that, but they don't physically hurt somebody. And my biggest issue now with the flares, not only does it delay starts to games, but it's now getting to the point where Celtic are now, the club are being punished for a group of supporters that are they just are absolutely convinced that they have to bring in these flares to create some sort of atmosphere. Does it look cool? I guess so, but for me, there is no place for it in football. And it will continue to, I think, affect teams. Celtic won't be the last team that will get punished for this.
And they're not the first.
No, certainly not. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes with that. Very disappointing they won't be able to take fans there. That is all from us here on the Tartan Touchline. Thank you for tuning in to our first episode. Please do write into us with some feedback, suggestions, anything you'd like us to cover. You can find us on Instagram at the Tartan Touchline, Facebook, the Tartan Touchline, TikTok at the Tartan Touchline, and you can even write to us at thetartantouchline@gmail.com. We will be back with you next week. Until then, I've been Aidan Gilbride.
And I've been Lauren McCulloch.
Catch you next week.